Good morning, Gamecocks. Today is Thursday, May 1st, the year of our Lord 2025, and this is Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Thanks for joining me today. Appreciate everyone listening. Hope you all are anxiously awaiting the weekend. I know I have. It's my wife's birthday, so I'm excited about that. Kentucky Derby. Talked to a friend of mine the other day that's heading to the Kentucky Derby. My brother went a few years back. I've had friends that have gone. It is on my bucket list, so certainly excited for all of you that get into that. It's the time I think we all get into horse racing at least once a year, and so looking forward to the weekend. But we still got 2 more days to go here on Coffee, today and tomorrow, before we get their big softball series this weekend with Alabama in town. We had Ashley Chastain Woodard on the morning show yesterday. I don't know if that interview is cutting up on our YouTube channel yet, or this YouTube channel yet, but it will be. It's also, you can always go back and find all of our live episodes, the super stream with the morning show and the show right here on Chief Sports South Carolina YouTube. And also for those listening on podcasts, those podcasts were up yesterday afternoon. Sorry for the delays earlier this week. Sometimes that system, the podcast system, gets a little wonky. Uh, I don't know why, but it does. So hopefully you guys got all caught up, because there were some that were late, on the podcast version on iTunes and Spotify and places of that nature that you can consume this content. So yeah, softball's got a big one this weekend as they continue to fight to host a regional, positioning for the SEC tournament, all that good stuff. We've had a lot of discussion about men's basketball lately. Went through Cam Scott to death almost yesterday, with Matt Anderson of the Late Night Gamecock Show on the morning show and the show. And then he had the Late Night Gamecock Show last night, he and Alex, and talked about a number of topics. So be sure to check that out. I'm at 14 now, I guess, sketching it out. So they have one spot left, and I would expect additions along the lines of the last two. In terms of Abu, the freshman, kind of took a flyer on that guy, and Cam Scott coming back. Things like that makes sense. Wouldn't expect any kind of superstar to be added. You never know, but the transfer portal's closed. So, and that doesn't mean you can't sign anyone. It just means that the field of possible players has shrunk. So we'll see what happens there. Gamecocks in football, they're not done yet. They're still in on a couple of offensive linemen, namely Nolan Hay from Incarnate Word out in Texas. He's supposed to visit. We'll see what happens there. Oklahoma State and South Carolina. And you never know what could pop up with football, because that puppy just closed on the 25th. So there's still a lot of football players out there. A lot of basketball players out there too. It's a musical chairs kind of thing with the portal now, because the portal closes and they are not necessarily close. So let me back up. The portal doesn't close. I mean, it closes. So it freezes the number of players playing musical chairs, but there's only a certain amount of chairs. And everybody sits down and gets a chair, and there's some people left standing. So they're out. I mean, and it's tough. That's the tough reality. It's one of those things, kind of similarly to when you start talking about a football roster with 85 scholarship guys on it, and a men's basketball roster with now 15. That's 100 people. When you start talking about, like, of those 100, maybe on average off of a team, you have what, 10 that get a shot at the pros. However many play football, pro football, and that's on average. Maybe at a place like South Carolina, I mean, some years they don't get anybody drafted, but they always have probably about 4 or 5 players at minimum on the roster at a given time that will eventually get drafted or play in the pros. So 5%. Nobody ever talks about the 93% guys that will never go pro, but that are good college players that are making life-changing money. Nobody talks about that either. They don't talk about the guys that get in the portal and get left out. And they don't talk about the vast majority of the roster to where just having NIL or revenue share and all the benefits that come with it are overwhelmingly positive. So tell me why, what, tell me what that's all about. You know. So anyway, don't want to get off sidetracked on that. The house settlement isn't done yet, and there will be plenty of thoughts, and including how it's going to fit in with what they're doing at South Carolina and all that good stuff. But that's the kind of stuff that gets to me, folks. It's not that they're paying players. It's not that there's a portal and unlimited transfers, though. I think every coach would tell you that one transfer is probably enough. It's not that. It's that the whole narrative about this entire thing is geared toward a small minority of players that are that could go earn or that are good enough to earn a bunch of money in ILYs and are popular enough and all that. So I just don't it's one of those things. It's strange to me that you're going to upend an entire sport and entire notion, the whole college sports apparatus in our country based on a handful of players. So, and the weird thing about it is the House lawsuit was brought by a swimmer who was good, and that's nothing but pure NIL. How much could he have really made? You know, what kind of market is there for a really, really good swimmer in the college level? I don't know. Endorsements, probably. It's probably the same argument that the Olympians made, and the Olympics. Nobody talks about that either. Is that the Olympics are still amateur sports. They're allowed to get endorsements. They give cash prize money for winning medals and stuff like that, which was long overdue. But they've handled the amateurism question greatly. NBC pays them billions of dollars a year to televise the Olympics. I mean, what's the difference? I guess there is a difference, but I don't know. I just it's just kind of crazy to me. It seems like there'd be plenty of more arguments rather than the NCAA running, tucking their tail between their legs and saying, "Well, we're guilty of all of this," and all that happy stuff. And they got that way by fighting stupid things. I think this roster limit situation is, it's kind of dumb. I mean, why didn't you grandfather guys in and gals in before? I don't know. And it's probably, the more I dig into it, it's probably not football and basketball and baseball. It's probably like other sports that have, a bunch of players that are walk-ons. And you gotta, it costs money. You get them uniforms, travel them, meals, stuff like that. And they were going to cut that and use savings. Kind of weird, right? To apply to the expense. So, but it's interesting. I just think it's interesting. I don't know. I mean, most big athletic departments, Ward Manuel actually said something that made sense. And he said, we should have done this to begin with. But that's Michigan, and they have plenty of money, and most Power Four schools do. And you have to keep in mind the NCAA, they love to give. I mentioned Incarnate Word earlier. Incarnate Word, the same seat at the table as Texas. It's just mind blowing. So anyway, I could talk all day about that, and you guys don't want to hear me talk about that. You want to hear me talk about Gamecock football, and that's what we're going to do as we kind of start to review spring practice, getting ready for the summer. South Carolina will have they have most of their roster complete now, but you got newcomers coming in from the portal this summer, and you got some freshmen still coming in. Donovan Murph, a wide receiver, obviously. They are counting on him to be in the rotation this year, and I think I have a good feeling about him. I'll just leave it at that. Max Kelly, the place kicker from Gallatin, Tennessee, talking to some Tennessee folks. They like him. People have mentioned him to me, state of Tennessee. Folks, Christian Ingram, defensive tackle from Georgia, Covington, Georgia, I believe. And then also Mike Tyler from Hammond, the tight end. So in addition to the tight end room, They'll be joining the program along with Clowney and George Wilson and Troy Pikes from the transfer portal, and then they get Nolan Hay and the other guy whose name escapes me from Troy. I mean, sorry, from Jacksonville State. I will mix up Troy and Jacksonville State. I don't know why, because Jacksonville State's the Gamecocks, but Todd Bates, who used to be the D-line coach at Clemson, he's now at Oklahoma. I kept saying he came from Troy and he came from Jacksonville State. My Clemson buddies, what Clemson buddies I have. I don't have very many of them, but I do have several that are good people. They kept correcting me on that, so just beware. But Boaz Stanley actually did come from Troy, Carolina's starting center next year, not Jacksonville State. So we'll see kind of what happens with all that. But they're coming in. It's a big summer in a lot of ways, and I'll tell you why. Overall, this is a team that, like last season's team, was a bit older. You had a lot of guys on that roster that had been through the pandemic year, so they got an extra year. They got red shirted. Many of them were recruited by the former staff. A lot of portal guys they brought in, the 1 year guys like Simpkins and, of course, Kyle Kennard and Demetrius Knight, who got drafted. DeAndre Jules is another example of that. They brought in several players that were one and done for last season. I think the idea was obviously Kamar Bell, who started at guard. So you had a lot of older guys, and they did a really good job, the strength staff, of getting the most out of the newcomers that came in for 1 year. Simpkins, Kennard, those guys. I thought, the off-season strength program, and Shane Beamer talks about this when they ask him about new players. He kind of asked them, how do you think about, what do you think about how we practice? What do you think about our training program? All that. And the thing that comes back all the time is it's different. And it's a bit difficult too for those that are new. I've always said that South Carolina, for 125 plus years, not a lot to crow about, so to speak, in football. And you're in the SEC, where there's a lot of programs with a long history of kicking butt on the football field at one point or another. They have down years too, but it's not compared to Carolina. So how do you fit in? I mean, I think you fit in and get somewhere in college football by being different. I mentioned Clemson yesterday, their rise to the top during a time where Urban Meyer's at Ohio State, and Nick Saban's at Alabama, collecting top recruits. And those guys don't miss an evaluation either, Saban and Meyer. I mean, it's not like Florida State or Southern Cal or places like that finish in the top 3 in recruiting and then go 7-5 or 5-7 or whatever. I mean, they Miami, always top 10 class. They hit. And so they did that and got their share of blue chippers, elite players, by being different. And they got there to begin with by doing a good job evaluating in the state of South Carolina. They kind of come off of that a little bit, but it's Clemson was different, and that attracts certain guys that are good at football. And it's a different type of deal. And Oregon is another program. They haven't won a national championship yet. A lot of people think it's a matter of time. I don't know. But, they went 17 years under Rich Brooks, who probably one of the more underrated coaches in the history of college football. Finally got to a Rose Bowl. I mean, they were bad. Oregon was god awful. The Ducks and Beavers were, the Ducks and Beavers. They step in. The ascension of Nike certainly helped. But what are they? What's attractive about going to Eugene, Oregon for players from around the country? Well, number one, the location is kind of, I don't want to say exotic, but it's a lot different than the rest of the country. I mean, Eugene is about 2 hours south of Portland. Beautiful. You just go right down I-5. Amazingly enough, Eugene and Corvallis are kind of 20 minutes apart. I mean, it's Greenville to Spartanburg to get from one to the other. And so right down there together, there's these big, it's kind of the volcano area up there. You get up towards Washington, Mount St. Helens, Mount Hood, all that good stuff. It's beautiful. Weather is different. And so that's that. But, if they didn't have those awesome uniforms and money and great facilities and a quote unquote unlimited NIL, the Ducks, just be kind of an exotic place. You can't sell that really. Um, it's not easy to get out there, to be honest. But, they're different. Everything about Oregon has been counter to like the kind of utilitarian approach of Nick Saban at Alabama, Urban Meyer at Ohio State, all that. It's the fun. They run a fun offense. They're always aggressive on defense. The mascot is nuts. One of my favorites, the duck. And then of course Nike. That's a big difference when you're Nike's top school and you have a different uniform every game, and that appeals to a certain amount of. So yeah, Oregon's gotten there by being different. When Virginia Tech rose under Frank Beamer, and they're kind of back to where they were for I think a series of hires. Let's just say hires that may, Justin Fuente obviously didn't work out. Let's say with Brent, I don't want to jinx it because Carolina's playing them. You don't want to sit here and say that's a hire, that's a bad hire. And then they beat the Gamecocks, right? I'd look like a horse's ass. But a hire that may or may not work out. And, back to the pack in the ACC, they've gone. But they were different under Frank Beamer. The special teams. Bud Foster's defense was unlike anything else in the country. You had a nice versatile offense where, Druckenmiller, Michael Vick, Marcus Vick, Tyrod Taylor, whoever they had, passers, throwers, whatever could fit in. You had Enter Sandman, and Blacksburg's not an easy place to recruit to either, just on its face. And they go over to the 757 and get guys. So there's that. What did Kansas State do under Bill Snyder to ascend? Well, they just hit the JUCO ranks pretty hard, and it worked. Not every Charlie Weiss went to Kansas and tried to do that with the JUCOs, and it blew up in his face and set them back years. Mississippi State did that and won an SEC West in the 90s under Jackie Sherrill, and then it kind of imploded, with JUCOs. That being a JUCO school back then was rare. It's almost like what Ole Miss is doing with the portal, though. Nowadays, I think you're a little more safe with the portal because you're dealing with more experienced players that are at a higher level of college football, even if they're Group of Five or FCS, than the JUCO ranks. And so, Ole Miss has gotten there by being a little different, with the transfer portal and stuff. Ole Miss, Missouri, and Carolina have benefited from it. They've elevated across the board there. Now, none of those schools have arrived like Oregon or K-State or Virginia Tech that play for a national title, or Clemson. I'm just pointing out the rare occasions where teams have ascended in college football. I'll tell you an example from the 90s is Florida. Florida won nothing. Nothing. Zip until Spurrier got there. And what was the big deal there? What was Spurrier? Way different. The SEC was a rock throwing contest. You lined up, you ran it up the middle. It was like bad NFL on offense. And he comes in and is like, well, shoot, we're going to throw it all over the place. And it was exciting and fun to watch, and they won big. It ended up 3 national championships. He won 1 and Urban won 2. So the Gators, there's an example. I mean, so being different in college football is with a lot of evidence a way to ascend. There's some programs that are always just a hire away. Mike Morgan talks about it. They're called volcano programs. you know. And I think you could make an argument about Clemson. I mean, Clemson did have a national championship, and they were kind of a powerhouse in the '80s. And through history, that John Heisman coached there, Frank Howard went to major bowl games. It wasn't like they won a bunch of they had won a bunch of ACC championships before Danny Ford. But they had two hires where they went through the wilderness, and then Dabo took over and built it back, and it took them time. And in this era of college football, he did it by being different. So, even if you want to kind of say, well, Clemson was a volcano, I don't think Clemson was a volcano program. I think they're pretty stable. Even during the lean years, you could count on them winning 7 or 8 in the ACC. But just didn't get a championship for about 20 years. But it's one of those things where you look around and see who has ascended, who's gotten there. And it's by being different. I mean, I think Tennessee going to the playoffs last year, Tennessee's a volcano program. I mean, they've always been really good. They have the one national championship under Fulmer, but they've always kind of, I mean, their lean years, their wilderness journey was Kiffin, then Dooley, then champions of life, and then all of a sudden, and then Pruitt, and all of a sudden they hire Heupel, and they get their guy, and he's won. Won a bunch at Tennessee. But how did they kind of get back up? Well, Derek Dooley and champions of life and Jeremy Pruitt, and after Lane left after 1 year, not the most exciting brand of football, right? Well, they said, all right, well, we can't just say, hey, we're Tennessee. We recruit 5-star players and we're going to out talent everybody like they used to. So they zigged when everybody else zagged and decided to make defenses throw up by running tempo and going a million miles an hour and all that on offense. So that I'll say that's going to be interesting to see what happens moving forward, because a lot of times in the SEC, you'll have something like that hits. Like when Gus Malzahn had Cam Newton, and even before he did, when he was at Auburn, that system got tricky, right? I mean, you had the first year under Chiswick, they were kind of hard to stop. Then Cam comes in and they won it all. And then Gus goes away after 2011, and then they sink to the bottom and go winless. And he comes back. They had Nick Marshall, had that great year where they played it for the national championship again. And it was difficult. But as the years went by, teams adjusted. And then maybe you don't have 1 year, you don't have the ideal quarterback, or you don't have this piece or that piece, which happens in college. And so it's going to be interesting to see on that note about Josh Heupel if that continues. Like if because there's been times teams have figured that out. They didn't score a bunch of points last year. Was it Nico? I don't know. But anyway, that's how Tennessee kind of got back to where they are now, out of the doldrums a bit by being different. I mean, that's just Mike Leach won everywhere he's went. Rest his soul. Miss him every day. At Texas Tech, Mississippi State, and Washington State. Pullman, Starkville, and Lubbock are not garden spots. But guess what? In the big, he won at Washington State in the Pac-12. He comes to the big bad SEC, and they're at least good for 8. We were at least good for 8 wins a year. And there'd be times they'd play a team, they were decided underdogs, and they'd beat them. And that was just in 4 years at Mississippi State. And what was Mike Leach? He was different, and that's a program that has had similar, kind of a similar history to South Carolina. I think South Carolina's a better job than Mississippi State because of location and a number of factors, but he won. So different in college football can be, I'm not saying it definitely is, but can be a ticket to ascension. And South Carolina, scheme wise, I certainly agree that Clayton White's defensive scheme is different. It's creative and all that. I think with the offensive, the yeah, I don't want to talk about Marcus Satterfield, but I think the vision for Beamer under as far as the offense goes is a lot like what his dad did at Virginia Tech. Stay flexible to adapt your personnel. Always want to run the football, but you may have these days, and even back then, you may have different styles of quarterbacks. Cutter Woods is a different style of quarterback than Lenore Sellers. You just got to kind of adapt because no two guys are alike, and you got to play to your strengths. I think that's smart. Um, if you go straight futuristic scheme, sometimes that backs you into a corner, as Gus Malzahn found out at Auburn when you're trying to do pocket passers and you really need that dual threat to make it all go. Sometimes it was ugly because you just couldn't. They didn't have that guy. So the idea is to be adaptable, but I think certainly if you look at just what Dowell Loggins did here and what I expect out of Mike Shula, there's some creative stuff in there. I think Dowell as a play caller at times maybe took the air out of the ball a little too much last season when the run game clearly wasn't there. It's not so much a criticism as kind of what I saw happening. But there were a lot of plays he dialed up that were good. I think Mike Shula will be the same way. But when you have a player like Lenore Sellers and, you have a daggum highlight reel a mile long to show people, it looks like a lot of fun. Your offense does. And even if the offensive scheme itself isn't wouldn't be in the fun bin, right? You still have everything else about the program, special teams, aggression, the atmosphere, what they do on social media. By the way, did you know that South Carolina is the 10th most followed college football team in the country? I don't have the list in front of me. I saw it this morning. I'm going to talk about it on the show. But everybody else on that list has had unreal success. So something, number one, the social media team, Justin King and those folks, they do a great job. Number two, I think having exciting players like Sellers and Dylan Stewart and having a great atmosphere along with the creativity is great, and that's important. Just as an aside here, again, points to what we're talking about, but because South Carolina, after Steve Spurrier left, had a relevancy and branding issue, and this is not Will Muschamp's fault or Ray Tanner's fault or anybody's fault. It was just for 10 and a half years, almost 11 years, the hook to get that media attention, along with the winning and players like Clowney and Alshon and Marcus and all the greats from that era. The hook was Steve Spurrier. Everybody wanted to know what he had to say. Everybody in college football misses the guy. He was on with Greg McElroy the other day talking about, Greg was like, "We miss you." Spurrier's like, "Oh yeah, blah blah blah." By the way, Coach came to the Dawn Staley statue reveal. He and his wife, University of South Carolina graduate Jerry Spurrier. So I saw a little video of them. Good to see them up and in good spirits. Coach turned 80 in April. Looks like his knee may be bothering him a little bit in the video, but he's in great shape for 80. I wish I was in as good a shape as Steve Spurrier. I'm 48. But anyway, so that was the hook. Before that, it was Lou Holtz. So you're talking about 18 years of needed relevancy for South Carolina football, and then they walk out the door, and then so it's Will Muschamp, and Will recruited really well, and they sort of they had a lot of success first 2 years. Went from 3 wins to 9, and then the bottom fell out, and he was fired. But at that point, you look around the league and you're like, well, gosh, you got Mike Leach and Lane Kiffin at the Mississippis. Saban's still there. Kirby's building a monster in Georgia. Dabo's right up the road. North Carolina just hired Mac Brown. That's a pull. I mean, it's you kind of sitting there wondering where the Gamecocks going to go. And Shane Beamer comes in, and people, Dennis Dodd ranked him the worst coach and lowest ranked coach in Power Four because he hadn't been Power Five, hadn't been a coordinator. Nobody graded the hire very well, using the tired narrative of that. And just through vision and putting the right people in the right place and giving Justin King and those folks the breathing room to do a good job. And look, I'm saying, look, if he wasn't winning, it would probably get on everybody's nerves, frankly. But doing that and getting into by allowing that to happen, because some coaches and not Will Muschamp. Will Muschamp let people do their job. I'm not coming down on him, but Beamer's over the top cooperative with it, believes in it, and it's gotten the program into the top 10 as far as follows goes. And why does that matter? Because a lot of people, they say it doesn't. And if I just looked at it on the surface, I would be like, who cares? It's social media. It's not real life. Well, recruits look at that stuff, and also your branding. I mean, your branding and popularity and people knowing about you in college football, it helps to kind of undo the implicit bias against non-blue bloods for blue bloods. College football playoff committee, dare I say. And so good job there. But that a part of that social media following it is different. There's always something creative. I mean, not all of it is going to be something that everybody likes or loves, but it's also something that when you kind of look at the bottom line and the big picture, there's usually something for everybody, and people anticipate. It also helps us get through a long off season, especially with baseball and men's basketball struggling. It's boy, everybody's really going to be fired up about that Virginia Tech football game. So in the summer program, Luke Day, he is different. And it's not like he hadn't made adjustments to his program. He's got NFL guys helping him, SEC guys helping him. I mean, you look at the transformations a lot of guys made last offseason. So that's going to be important this offseason. And that's kind of the general point here, because you have a team that, unlike last year, was older. You got a lot of younger guys. And, what is football? It's a developmental sport. The younger guys, just by simple math and human nature, they're not as far along. So for a guy like, Anthony Addison at edge, who Beamer was talking up, who, Hale McGranahan said from the beginning, he's a ball player. It's just size. And so it's just a matter of time. So the question becomes with Addison, how much progress can he really make this offseason? Can he make enough to get on the field? I don't know. I won't rule it out because he's a good player. The hard part, getting good at football is, the natural stuff, the twitchiness or whatever. That's already kind of the hay's in the barn. So offseason strength, Xavier Hardy, it's a big summer for him. Anybody new they bring in from the portal, Damon Clowney and George Wilson, this is a now or never season. So the harder they work and the more Luke Day and his staff can do with them to maybe get them in a position, to do something at this level of football, that's important. Rasul Faison has already gained 20 pounds. His situation, I feel good about it because of the lawsuit up in New Jersey with the Rutgers player. That was sort of similar situation-wise to Faison. And in many ways, it's probably that case, that situation would probably be more at Rutgers would probably be more likely to be, I don't know. It's probably more likely that would have been disapproved by the NCAA during normal times than Rasul's, because he was with the NCAA, an NCAA team, then couldn't cut it and went back to junior college and then came back and then back again. So his journey's been a little different. Rasul just went to JUCO straight out of school in Pottstown. I think he went to a prep school in Connecticut. And, so I don't know why that one would survive legal muster when Rasul's would not, but we'll see. Um, but yeah, so he's already had a good time. Just keep going. The young players like Fred Johnson and Matthew Fuller and Jalewis Solomon, all those guys from the 2024 class, they're going to be counting on a lot more next year. It's important for them to have big summers. So, that's part of it while we're kind of all at the beach and going on vacation. And wife and I are talking about taking a cruise in July. And I know Phil's going to the beach for a little while. Phil, the mad dog. Everybody is kind of chilling out, waiting for football to start. These guys are sweating and lifting and changing their bodies and getting right. Donovan Murph coming in. That's another guy. So, there's a lot of work to be done between now and then. In South Carolina, last off season, whatever tweaks they made, it worked. It's still different. It's still unique. And that's kind of the key in college football. So there's a big picture, there's a long-term and short-term sort of theme here as we wrap up the episode. And we'll have Chad Holbrook and Rafael Esparza on the morning show today. Alex Jones from the BigSpur.com, Gamecock Smorgasbord on the show. So be sure to check that out. But long term it's good to be different. I think South Carolina's sort of done a good job of that under Shane Beamer. And look, through the years when they've had the Joe Morrison era, that was very different. Run and shoot, 3-3-5 Joe Lee Dunn defense and winning started the black uniforms to a certain extent. 2001 came along under Morrison. Just by Lou Holtz and Steve Spurrier being here, it was a little different. And then Beamer, it's combined with the sort of the next gen game atmosphere, the next gen social media presence, all that has really been different. Doesn't mean they're going to get there, folks, but I'll take my chances on different than just kind of the same. I think one lesson we all have learned is what works at some places doesn't work at the others. We've learned that at South Carolina. What works some places doesn't work at South Carolina. How about that? So that's the big picture, and then our long term. And then the short term is this is a huge summer for this football program and team. If they can make gains individually, get their bodies right, get ready to go to training camp, preseason camp, whatever you want to call it, and get the football worked out and be physically ready to tackle another brutal schedule, then it could be a good season. It really can. And then it's just a matter of, being competitive, being in games, and then what happens in the course of the games, wins or losses wise, depends on a number of factors, as we all know and found out last season. All right, JC Shurburtt's Coffee. Thanks for listening this morning on a Thirsty Thursday, May the 1st, first day of May. I can't believe May's already here. We'll holla at you soon.